are going to finish out our Irish week of cooking with an Irish pub pie. And we're going to make our 2 sourdoughs. We've got our basic and we've got our Guinness sourdough. And then we'll also bake up some of our Irish and Aggies we made earlier in the week and prep our fruit bowl. So we got a busy evening tonight. So let's get our sourdough ready and in the oven. Okay, this is our basic one. I'm going to flip it out onto our parchment paper. Put this over here. And then we're going to give it a nice score. I'm going to do kind of a long one down the middle. And then we'll do a little more decorative one here. I know some people have gotten into where they're like cutting little shamrocks in, or I saw another one doing like a little Celtic pattern. I'm not that good. Okay, let's put this loaf. Where are my pot holders? Don't want to accidentally grab this because these are 500 degrees. So I had my Dutch oven in the oven for the last hour at 500, preheating up. Let's put it over here. And they're very hot. Okay. Carefully put it in. Beautiful. We're going to put our lid back on. And let's do our Guinness one. You can see it has a nice brown color to it from the Guinness beer. And we're going to do we'll do our little square score that we like to do. And then some little lines all the way around. And then let's see if we can't do something fun in the middle. I'm not sure. I'm not very good at this. We'll just do it. There we go. Got to have one of those special little hand scorers to do the pretty detail. And I've been thinking about buying one, but again, I have too many kitchen products. Let's put it in here. Nice and carefully. We're going to put our lid on, and then we're going to put these guys back in the oven at 500 degrees for 20 minutes. They're very hot, so always use your oven mitt. We're going to put this first guy in, and then I'll go back and grab my second one in our oven. So we've got one going in here, because everything we do is real time, guys. So hopefully they all turn out. Okay. Perfect. And then I'm going to put my timer for 20 minutes so I don't forget to take the lid off in 20 minutes. Okay, let's get working on our pub pot pie. So the base for our pub pot pie tonight is going to be this big round roast that we have with carrots, onions, mushrooms, celery, and some fresh herbs. But right now I'm going to just cut this down into some nice chunks. You could use a stew meat if you wanted to, or a chuck roast would have been lovely, but this is all they had. And we are using our butter crust that we made earlier today during our lunchtime stream. And so I'm just cutting this first down into long strips so it's easier for me to cube. And this is going to make 2 big pot pies. Because again, we're feeding like 10 people tonight. So we've got our little army to feed. I'm going to just move that out of the way. And I'm using a cleaver. And if you've never worked with a cleaver before, it is wonderful for cutting up meat. Because it literally just slices through the meat so easily, much better than even your big chef knives. But if you do a lot of meat cutting, invest in one. It took me forever to finally get one. Actually, the funny thing is I used my bank rewards to get it, like my little bank credit card. And I was like, oh, let's see what they have on there. And they had it. It was, I think, from like Henkel's or something like that. But I love it. We're going to put a little bit of olive oil in here, about 2 tablespoons, because we've got a really large pot. I'm going to turn my heat on to about a 7, And I'm just going to be adding in my chunks as I cut. And then I'm going to, of course, cut off this fat because it won't cook up nicely in our pub pie. I'll go through and nice little things. You don't want to have huge bits of meat because you got to think when you're eating it, you can't, it's not a steak. You won't be able to cut it after you've cooked it. There we go. Or at least it won't be functional to cut. Let's trim off the fat.
You have a question. What is a pub pie?
A pub pie is essentially a pot pie. This is a beefy pot pie, and we're going to be using some Irish red ale in it. But it is a fare that you will find at a pub in Ireland, very common there. Pub food is typically like really homey, cozy food, stews, pot pies, fish and chips. I remember when my brother was getting married, his wife is from Ireland, and we were in Ireland for his wedding. And, we went and hit all like the pubs and whatnot. And it's just simply like comfort food because, it's cold and rainy there a lot. Okay. Got just a little bit more. Always make sure you cut off your fat. Trust me, it won't add any extra flavor to this stew. It will only leave you with a chewy bite. So always cut it off. Unless you're going to be slow cooking or roasting over a long time, cut your fat off because it just is chewy. We're getting these nice cubes in here. Perfect. So you want them cubed. You see, it's like kind of like the size of a dice. Just perfect little bite-sized pieces. Your meat will shrink up a little bit as you cook because the natural like liquid and juices in the meat will come out. So we'll just get slightly smaller. Cut off a little bit of that fat too. But you see how effortlessly it is to cut up this stew meat with a knife? It really does make a big difference. Okay, last bit, or look, hidden one under here. And we're going to cut this fat off here, right along. And this cut of meat, this was a bottom roast. Ideally, I would either use like a stew meat, which is just a random cuts of meat that you might get from your butcher, or a chuck roast. But this one will work well for our meal. But I like chuck roast because it has a bit more marbled fat in it, which gives you just a little bit tender of a meat. There we go. We're going to cut these up. Just about done. This is like the process. You feel like you're doing nothing because it just keeps going and going. Okay. And then I'm excited for this. I love making pot pies because I feel like they're such a pretty thing, and I'm going to try to do a little shamrock design on it if I have got the skills, because they just always look so nice. You pop them in and they look like a nice little finished product at the end. And it's growing up, I actually never really ate pot pies. I mean, you had like the Mrs. Calendar pot pies that you could buy in the freezer section, but we never had those. We never really ate them growing up, but I do make them a lot now. And my parents absolutely love them. So I just find it strange that we never had them growing up. But they are delicious, especially with our butter crust that we're going to be using tonight. I have it sitting right there, just warming up, because you put it in the fridge and you let it chill. And then about 30 minutes before you're ready to use it, you pop it out so it's a little bit more malleable, but you still want your butter to be cold. Okay. And we're down to the last cuts. When you're cooking for a small army like we are, everything you do is like 10 times more.
You have a question, what type of meat is that?
That is a bottom roast. So a bottom roast is, it's not the ideal cut. I would have preferred, a chuck roast, but it will work well for this. I'm going to turn up my heat just a little bit. I'm going to grab some tongs and give it a nice little stir. And then we're going to sprinkle some salt and pepper over this because we want to make sure our meat gets a nice season on it. There we go. So I've got some garlic salt. We'll give it a nice little bit of flavor. And that's about a teaspoon and a half. And then we're gonna use about a teaspoon of black pepper. It always looks a lot more as I'm shaking, but it actually doesn't come out very much. And then we're gonna give it a nice toss. Make sure all of our pieces kind of get coated in it. And then I'm gonna turn up my griddle to high so we can start cooking this off. Perfect. Okay, while that's cooking, let's start prepping our vegetables. We're gonna use 1 yellow onion. So I'm gonna start by cutting off the ends. We'll make a nice little slit down. And we're gonna remove this whole outer layer of the onion. I'm not about to work to try to save that last layer. I just cut it all off for ease, because also a lot of times it's a little like chewy anyways. And then we're gonna do a nice mince on this. I'm gonna make 4 slices this way, and then we're just gonna make little squares. And then when I get to the end, I just flip it so it's a little bit safer to cut. If you find that your knife is slipping when you're cutting like onions, it's because it's dull and you just need to sharpen it up, and then it will go back to effortlessly cutting through your onions. There we go. We've got our onions, and now let's prep our carrots. So I'm using full-size carrots, and you could use baby carrots and just chop those up. But since these are full, I've got to give them a nice peel on them, because the outer skin on a carrot does not cook up as well, and it will be chewy, and it doesn't have as nice of a flavor. So you always got to peel them if you're going to use them, because it just gives you a much better flavor and texture. There we go. And get this guy. And y'all, you just run your peeler along and slide down. It's not too bad, and you won't cut yourself, I promise. I know some people, they think it's kind of scary to peel. They're afraid they're going to like peel off their hand, but you won't. There. This is kind of like a perfect snowman nose. And then when we've got them all peeled, we are just going to chop off the ends on both sides, because you don't want the stump part, and at the bottom part I find just is not as good. So I'm gonna do 3 at a time. So we'll do the tops and the bottoms, and then I'm just gonna give a nice little slicing to them. These are pretty thin carrots. If I had a thick carrot, I'd want to have it, or maybe even quarter it, because sometimes you can get a really thick carrot, but these aren't too thick. So just little slices will be fine. You just don't want to have a huge piece of carrot in there, because it won't get as tender, and also who wants their bite to be just a carrot? Let's give our pot pie a little twist here. Beautiful. You can already smell it. The pepper and the garlic salt just makes a lovely aroma. Okay. And then let's get these carrots. And nice little slices. All easy peasy. Get those ends. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to turn my meat, get some of mine from the outside in. There we go. And now I'm going to throw in my onions. We're going to let them cook in there for just a second, and then we'll put our carrots in. And then I'm going to put a nice big spoonful of garlic. You could use fresh garlic if you wanted to. It'd be about 2 to 3 cloves. Let me grab a spoon here. Little carrot, no worries. And just like good kind of heaping spoonful. And then we're going to use our tongs and give it a nice stir. Mix it all around so that our onions start kind of giving the beef a nice flavor as well. Beautiful. And this is going to be our filling for our pot pies. So it's kind of resembles like the base of a stew, but it's going to be very thick. It's not going to be as liquidy. Let's get our carrots in there. And then we'll chop up our potatoes, our celery, and our rest of our stuff. Let's get our celery in there because that's in the onion family. There we go. Get rid of, and we're just going to do a nice kind of a thin slice here. You don't want any super big, and we're going to use the leaves too. This is about 4 stalks, and again, this is going to make 2 big pot pies. There we go. And all the way. And then I'm just going to throw these tips, last tips part, because they're a little dry. Put our celery in here, and then we're going to give it a big toss. And this is for our Irish pub pie. So it's kind of like a beef pot pie, but we're going to use a little bit of Irish ale in it as well. You could use Guinness too. But we used up all of our Guinness this week in some other recipes. But I do had some Irish ale, some George Killian's. There. Perfect. Let those all kind of simmer. And now let's get our potato chunks going. We're going to be using some yellow potatoes because they'll keep their form. They won't get mushy in our pie. And I can leave the skins on because they'll get nice and tender. And I'm going to give them a nice kind of a smaller chop because I want them to get tender up. But the beauty of this is that they'll keep their form in here. So I want them to be about the same size as the carrots because you don't want anything that's too big and unmanageable. So I'm going to kind of cut these into 4ths and then kind of quarter them. Perfect. And this is just like a very nice kind of stewy inside. So like a lot of places, they would do a beef stew one day and then their leftovers would get made into a pub pie. So it's kind of a way you can refashion one meal into another to feed your hungry customers. There we go. Nice chop through. And you could use, I'm using like yellow potatoes. You could use a russet. You'd have to give their skin, you'd have to peel them because their skins don't kind of get tender. So they'd be chewy and they might get a little mushy. So I would recommend using either like a gold potato, a yellow potato, a red potato, one of those ones that have a waxier texture. Okay, I think I'm only going to, don't think I'm going to use my last potato because this is getting us quite a bit. Perfect. And then we're going to give these a nice stir in. And I'm going to use my tongs. There. I'm going to cover them up, let them all kind of cook in their juices. We're going to give some spices and our ale in here in just a second. There we go. Nice little twist. Smells lovely. Okay, and then we're going to chop up some mushrooms. Now, mushrooms aren't something you would typically find in them, but I do love a good mushroom in my pot pies, and normally I do chicken pot pies. So we're just going to put a couple of these in here, just to add a nice little kind of meaty texture with the mushrooms. And I'm using baby Bella's, but you could use a white button if you wanted to. There we go. I think we'll save the last 3. This is about good on here. Toss these guys in. I'm going to just turn down my temp just a little.
You have a question? What flavor complement does the celery get?
The celery, so the celery is kind of in the onion family, and it gives you that just kind of, I mean, I want to say celery overtone, but you can't use celery to describe it, but it gives you just that nice homebody flavor to it. Celery's in a lot of soups and stuff, and it just adds to a lovely sauce. And even though like most of my kids, they hate celery, they like the flavor in the stew. So they might not eat it, but they prefer my stews with it in it than without. It just makes a nice flavor, a full body flavor. Okay, let's do a little tomato paste so that can cook down. And this is going to add to kind of our thick kind of gravy that it's going to be in. I can never get these tomato cans because they're so small. Let's try my other can opener. I wish they'd make them like the peel back. Look at this. It just does not want to. Let's flip it over. See if we can do it on that side. There we go. Had to twist all the way around. Simple things. You know, if they just made a little twist off like dog food, be perfect. And we're going to use about just a heaping spoonful, so about half the can. Because we don't want the tomato to be too much of the show. And if you've never really worked with tomato paste, it's almost a tomato reduction. So it actually has a pretty strong flavor for a little bit of amount. It kind of packs a good punch. But it will give us a lovely color to our sauce and just a richness, and the acidity will help balance it out as well. And we want to mix it in here and let it kind of simmer before we add some of our spices and then our beer and broth. There we go. This is starting to look delicious. You can see it's a nice meaty filling for our pub pie. And we're going to serve it with some braised cabbage as well on the side. There we go. Okay, let's add a little bit of thyme. We're going to use about half a tablespoon. And we're going to put in 2 bay leaves, and I'm going to crunch them up into really small pieces. You won't notice them at all in your soup because you got to make it nice and small, but this will allow the bay leaves flavor to really come out in our short cooking time. Okay, let's put our beer in. It says it's a twist off. There we go. Okay, 1 12-ounce bottle of beer. We're just going to pour it slowly over it. You can see it's just bubbling up. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to kind of turn everything in it. Nice. Now, again, with your pot pie filling, you don't want it to be super brothy, so we're going to add some flour in here in just a second, but we're going to just let it kind of cook up in the seasonings. And then, here's my beef bouillon. Let me get a spoonful, and then we're going to put that in there, and then we're going to go take the lids off of our sourdough and turn our oven down. So we're going to give a nice big spoonful of beef bouillon. This is going to give a lovely flavor as well as kind of add to the saltiness to our meat. There we go. And let's mix it in there so it can start flavoring up everything, getting all that nice flavor in there. And you could use, like I always say, you could use beef broth, but then you would add so much liquid, but we want this nice beefy flavor. Okay, let's go take those lids off because it's going to keep yelling at me until I do. Okay, I hear ya. Let's get my mitts on. Okay. Let me put this over here. And we have this is our Guinness loaf. Nice, beautiful pop. Take this one off. And I'm going to show you our lovely basic loaf. A really big pop on that one. Okay. Now I'm going to turn my temperature down to 450, which is also what we're going to be baking our pies at. There we go. Perfect. I'm going to put my timer for 20 minutes. Perfect. Okay, let's finish up our pies and get them in the oven. Okay, beautiful. Got it stewing up here, and I'm just going to use my spoon and taste it to make sure it has enough salt, because now is the last time I can flavor it. Perfect. So we're going to let it stew on low. I'm going to sprinkle some flour over it real quick, and then we're going to roll out our crusts, and then we're going to fill our pies. Okay. And we're going to just, this is going to use to thicken up our broth. So you just want to kind of sprinkle it over the top, and then we're going to give it a good mix in. And this will allow our kind of the beer and the broth in there to turn more into a gravy that will stick to the meat, so you don't have a runny pie. There we go. Then I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit more over. You don't want to put a big clump on the top, because if you do, you'll get like a little dumpling in your stew. So I just do some, and then I spread it around. And now we'll do our next little kind of shower, little snow of flour. There we go. Beautiful. Perfect. And then I'm going to mix this in and let it thicken up. And we're going to just continue letting it simmer on low while we roll out our crusts. Beautiful. Okay. And you can see it's already starting to thicken up around it. And as it simmers, it will get even thicker. Beautiful. Okay, let's roll out this dough. We've got our little mat here. I could totally also just roll it out on my counter, but I bought this at IKEA the other day, so I'm like, well, I got to try it out, see how it works. And then what I like to do is get a piece of parchment paper, and I lay it right over the top, and that just helps so my rolling pin doesn't stick to it. But I'm going to start by giving it a good smush down like this. You see? And this will help make it a little bit easier to roll our shape out. So we'll have this, did a nice little dusting here. And then just so I can see it in the beginning. And then we get to the very end, I'll put my parchment paper on so we can then put it on our pot pies. And I'm just going to be using, they're like 9-inch pie pans. They're like a stoneware one. And they always like tend to really cook up my crust really well. I've used glass pie tins before, and I've used metal ones, but these like they're just stoneware. They work really well. Perfect. And keep the roll. And it's a good arm workout, I'll tell you that. When you're getting a rolling pin, this is a marble one, so it is heavy. But I like to have the heft behind it because it makes for a really great, like, you can really firmly push down on it. Okay. Let's see. Make sure it doesn't roll away. Perfect. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. We'll do our transfer.
You have a question? What goes into the dough?
The dough, this is my butter crust. So it is just flour, butter, salt, and water. So super easy. We made it up during our lunchtime stream, and it is like the best pie crust ever. I used to make my pie crust with shortening, And then I switched to a butter crust, and it is just, it's so much better. And especially for like savory goods. But I make apple pie with this too. It's just so good. Okay. And we'll finish making it pretty at the end. In the beginning, it's just about putting it in there. Okay. Let's get a little flour to dust this on here. So it does, our next one doesn't stick because it has a little bit of residual. And let's get another mound. Where did I put them? Right over here. Perfect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my first one, and then we'll pop that in the oven so it can start cooking while I make the second one. That way, we'll make sure you have one done by the end of our stream. Let it cook right away. There we go. I'm going to roll this guy out. And I like having these little mats because they help you kind of, they have like, you know, the diameters going across, and it makes up cleanup a little bit easier too because they just wash right off. And sometimes when I used to do parchment paper, like so between two pieces of parchment paper, this has been working out great. Okay. Perfect. I think this is going to be perfect. Okay. Let's fill up our crust, but here we can look beautifully at our lovely, right there. You see how it thickened up really nicely in there? So I'm going to get a ladle, we'll spoon it in, and then let me grab my shamrock cookie cutter. I used it earlier. Give it a quick wash. I cut my daughter's lunch sandwiches today for her school. I cut with my little shamrock for her. We did a little St. Patrick's Day themed lunch. Okay, let's get this baby filled up. And that way we can pop him in the oven. You're going to want to use a ladle to scoop your meat into your pie so you can get that nice kind of gravy in there as well. My aim is to use about half of this in the pie. And it might seem like I used a huge amount in this pot, but it fills up the two pies perfectly, as long as it's filled up to the top. Look how beautiful this is. Perfect. Maybe one more scoop. And then let's do our transfer with our dough. I'm going to try to cut my shamrock right here in the middle. Look at that. It's a cute little shamrock. We've got it right over the middle so that our pie will steam. And now I'm just going to push my butter crust around all the way. And then we'll use a fork in just a second to make the nice ridges. I'm going to peel off any extra that we have. Perfect. And then as you just kind of do, you want to make sure you do the smush and seal your two crusts together. That's going to kind of make a nice little, like a seal on it that will keep them together, because you don't want your stuff oozing out the side, and that's kind of why you put your little hole in the middle so it lets steam escape. Otherwise, I forgot to do that once, and it like really big. And now
What is it?
It went really big. It was like a true pot pie. It had a pot belly on it. And now I'm going to take a little bit of fresh parsley here. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill in our little shamrock so he's nice and green. Beautiful. Okay, let's put this guy in the oven. But what I like to do when I have them is I put them on a baking dish or on a baking tray, because pot pies, if the gravy, sometimes you make it too soupy and it will boil right over. So we don't want that to happen. This will save you from cleaning up your oven. I forgot to do my little fork thing, so you guys can watch me do this real quick. It'll take me 2 seconds. You just literally, to get that picture perfect pie crust, you just take your fork and you go around the edge, just like this. And those give you those beautiful ridges, and it also helps kind of crisp up your pie crust evenly. So, even I forget steps all the time. Perfect. Let's put this in the oven. Look at our beautiful sourdoughs roasting. Hopefully it's not too tall. Oh, push down. Perfect. Okay, let's get on to our next part. We're gonna make our next pie in just a second, but let's start braising up our bacon for our cabbage so that can start cooking, because that's just kind of like a wait time. And then we can roll out our next pie, and then our bread will be soon, and then we can move our pieces up to the top. So we're not gonna use the whole slice of bacon. We're just gonna use about half. So I'm just gonna pull off half. Maybe we'll make some breakfast sandwiches this week with the rest of this bacon. Sounds delicious.
Do you have a question? Are you a chef?
I am a self-taught chef. No, I'm not a chef. I have just been cooking for years, and I love cooking. And I love trying new recipes and new flavor profiles and experimenting. And I've been cooking since I was 13 years old. That's when I started taking over my cooking for my mom. And I love it.
Do you have another question? Where are all the kids right now?
They are playing we have several playrooms in our house. And what we do for our older ones, as one of their ways to earn money for all the things that kids want right now, they can take turns playing with the little ones and keeping them entertained. My other daughter just came in from a walk. So it's just, they're kind of all out, but we have, a good sized house. It's about like 3,500 square feet. And so we have, just playrooms here and there, and they're just hang out, having fun with each other, hopefully. Okay, we've got our bacon cooking, and I'll bring our cabbage over there, but let's work on our next pie. And get our butter crust here. And I always tell my kids I want to respect their privacy, so if they want to come on the stream, they can, but it's up to them. I'm not going to force them to be a part of it. Okay, let's push this down. Make it out that way. It's a little bit easier. I will say some people are like excellent at like making the perfect round shape. That is not me. I am not patient. I think that's what it comes down to.
You have a question? How many kids and what are their ages, if you don't mind?
Yes. So I have 5 children, and my oldest daughter is 15 years old. Then my son is 13. Then I have a 9.5-year-old, an almost 4-year-old, and a 16, 17-month-old. So we've got the whole crew, every age, I feel like. And right now, I want to say my youngest and my oldest are my troublemakers. I think the oldest, it's just a girl, 15, so much attitude. And just kind of figuring out her place in this world. She's a great student, straight A, in all gifted classes, taking like 2-year advanced math, takes college classes in the summer. Smart cookie, but sassy. And then my youngest one he's so naughty. He's the naughtiest of the whole crew. His name fits him. His name is Jack, and he is a very, very naughty one. I always said, I don't know, if he would have been our first, he may have been an only child. Turn this down just a little bit. Let's flip our pie crust in. There you go. You want to make sure your pie crust is thick enough to go over the edges. Now, if you happen to roll it out and it didn't, just peel from places that have extra and do a little quilt work patching. Everything will turn out just fine. And let's get our last one here. A nice little bit of flour. I will say, I go through so much flour in this house, but good thing flour isn't crazy expensive. I'm like constantly like buying like the bulk flour. I buy a lot of my bread flour on Amazon. Surprisingly, it's much cheaper. Amazon has its own unbleached organic bread flour, and it is only like $5 for like a 5-pound bag, which is like a win. And I've calculated how much my sourdough bread costs from making it there, and it costs less than $1.75 to make a loaf of sourdough bread, versus I was spending between like $5 and $8 at the store for sourdough per loaf. So it's kind of crazy to think how much you're saving just on, you know, bread a week, because we eat probably 6 loaves of bread a week. You know, we are a big family, so, and can't beat homemade. And, you know, I used to never, you know, I just got into sourdough in the last year or so, and I used to only make yeast bread before, but I always wanted to try sourdough, but I was nervous about it at first, and I'm so glad I took the plunge and did it, because it's not as hard as I thought it was going to be, and it's so much more rewarding. Okay, we've got our next one going. Cut this guy out. Nice one in the middle. Didn't cut you hard enough down. We'll have to give it a little pull.
You have a question? Do you make all meals for your family?
Yes, I make, well, we do go out to eat. So it's not that we're never going out to eat, but it's not very fun going out to eat with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. But we go out to eat a couple of times a month, especially when we have like our traveling or with sports. But yes, I do make most of the meals for my family. Lunch, dinner, breakfast. So there's lots of cooking.
And everything you make is we eat.
Yeah, we eat everything I make, we eat. I said nothing's for show. I'm truly like, my streams are just showing you what I do every single day. But I try to teach you guys so that people can learn how to do it, because ideally I just want people to learn how to cook and embrace it, because I love it. And I think people think it's hard or it's scary or they'll never be able to make something great, but they can. And it just takes, you know, time, like a little practice here, understanding what spices go together, you know, what vegetables go well together. And then you're going to be able to, you know, free for all. Like, I rarely follow like a recipe to the thing. I typically am like, oh, well, these are the ingredients that I need, and then I just wing it from there. And it's because I understand how things are versus how I used to cook, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where I followed recipes very strictly. Turn this down a little bit. Okay, we're done with this guy. And let's see if we can bring this beautiful butter crust over. Lay him over the top. And then we're going to pinch up around. Kind of get those together. And then I'm just going to kind of cut off some of the excess, since you don't want it to be too thick and billow up around, because then you're going to have, it will just be a really hard chunk.
You have a question? Is that like a shepherd's pie?
Not a shepherd's pie. This is a pub pie, which is like a pot pie. A shepherd's pie is does not actually have pie crust in it. It's got like a meaty base with mashed potatoes on the top that kind of form the little crust of it. Now, I'm sure there are some shepherd's pie that has a crust base, but not the way I've ever made them. So, you know, don't hold me to that. But shepherd's pie has a nice like mashed potato base to it that, you know, and sometimes people put cheese on it. There we go. This is a pub pie because we use some ale in it, but really, and it's what they would serve in pubs in Ireland, but it is just kind of like a pot pie. Let me get that fork over here, and looks like a perfect time, and we'll go over there. We'll put our pot pies in, and we'll take our bread out. Look at that. Perfect timing. We'll go around with our little fork. This is going to give you that pretty bakery look to it.
Donna and Brenda sent you some roses.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Okay. Beautiful. And then I have my 2 extra little shamrocks, and we're just going to put them on here as well because you can't let our butter crust go to waste. Now we're going to go and take out our bread, and we'll put these in. So let me, I hear you. Let me get some trivets out so we can do a little switcheroo. It's like gymnastics in here. You know, I have 2 ovens, and now I'm wondering, did I need 3? Oh, beautiful. So here, our first one is our Guinness bread.
You got a question? Who's the cameraman?
My husband is the cameraman, and he's the greatest. He is helping me fulfill my dream, even though his hands are quite tired. Okay, we've got my first pot pie cooking. I'm giving it a rotate because, as you can see, one side is more golden than the other. And then we're going to put our second one in here very carefully. Okay, I need to get my pot holder, push it over some. This pan is like just big enough to hold both of them. It's a 1.5 sheets. There we go. But like I said, you want to have a pan just in case you have a boil over, because you don't want to clean up your oven afterwards. I think our other one just needs 15 minutes left on it, but let's get these out, and then we're going to finish our cabbage, and then we're going to bake our Aunt Aggie's. So let's bring our beautiful breads out, and we're going to start to display them and let them cool, because you can't cut into a sourdough loaf right away. It's got to sit for at least 10 minutes, sometimes even longer, because you don't want it to get doughy. You want the liquid inside it to evaporate out nicely. Keep a wonderful crumb on it.
This is a good question. Do you reserve Dutch ovens for bread?
Yes, I actually talked to my husband about it, because I said, oh, I don't want to get my other Dutch ovens dirty, because once you bake in a Dutch oven here, it is, like you can see, it has black stains on it. And that's what happens when your gets heated to a really high temperature. My parchment paper didn't want to come out with me. Look at this lovely golden brown toast. This is our Guinness bread. Do you see how it has such a brown color to it? But it's beautiful. And we made that with just, instead of water, we used Guinness, and it is just beautiful. And look, we have this wonderful golden crust on here. That's why I take it out of my Dutch ovens right away. But this is our traditional bread, and this is our Guinness. Absolutely gorgeous. Oh, hi, Bruni. I'm sorry. Did you run into me? Okay, let's get this show on the road. I'm going to move this out, clear up my area. Let's get some cabbage braised. We're going to bake up our dessert, which is some Aunt Aggie's. Okay, we've got our bacon cooking here. And now, we used cabbage in a soup earlier this week, and I had some left over. We're not going to use all of it. Probably save some to make a slaw, maybe. I'm always thinking about ways that I can use ingredients, you know, so that you don't waste anything, or you don't make a huge amount of cabbage and bacon, because this will be the kids, you know, exploring a new flavor set. It's a common thing in Ireland. I love braised cabbage. I think it's delicious, especially with bacon or corned beef. I was deciding what side to do with the pot pies. And I looked, and there was this thing called a colcannon, which is cabbage and mashed potato dish. And I just was like, I'm not sure about that one. Probably is delicious, but I was like, let's just do braised cabbage and bacon. Can't go wrong with that. Okay, we've got our bacon here. Cooking up nicely. Perfect. And now what I'm gonna do is we're gonna add a little bit of butter. Let me grab some right over here because I like the butter flavor with the cabbage. So just about a tablespoon. You don't need much. A little goes a long way, especially with the bacon grease, but it just makes it a little bit nicer. And we're going to put all of our cabbage in here. And we're going to let it braise up. Or saute up, not braise. We're not using a liquid. We're going to let it saute up. Perfect. Give it a little twist so we can kind of coat it in the butter. And then we're going to just let it brown in here. And get nice. We'll let it get this celery lettuce. Cabbage will get tender. It will start to wilt, and it will pick up the flavors of our bacon and the butter. And then towards the very end, I'll give it a little bit of garlic salt, but I like to reserve that towards the very end. Okay, let's clean up our station here just a little bit so that we can do our dessert. I'll grab my dessert out. It's Aunt Aggie's. If you were with us earlier in the week, we made our Irish Aunt Aggie's, which is it's kind of a like a cutout cookie, like a mix between a butter cookie and a sugar cookie. And it's absolutely delicious. It's one of my kids' favorites. So they take only 8 minutes. We're going to bake them in this oven right here, but it will be our Irish themed dessert. But I don't want any of our dinner on it. So let's wipe this area clean, and then we're going to cut them. They're simple. You make a big batch of it. You keep them frozen in the log form. And then whenever you want fresh cookies, you take them out and you slice them up and you bake them on a sheet. So let me get my baking sheet over here. Put these back on. I'm going to use my 1.5 sheets, which if you don't have any of these, get one. I think I got this from Target. It's like their Gold Touch form. You know, Williams and Sonoma makes you pay an arm and a leg for their Gold Touch pans. The Target brands by Threshold, they work just the same. Where's my parchment paper? Here it is. So we're going to line a baking sheet. I have my oven preheated right here to 350 degrees. And then just going to put it right here. I'm going to get a cutting board out. And then let me wash my knife over here real quick. All we have to do is we're going to slice it up. And then we'll lay them on our on our cookie sheet. But I always say, use a sharp knife. It works well. A butter knife's not going to cut through your frozen log. But here, I have it wrapped up in press and seal. I think it's great. But you could also do it in wax paper or things. But do you see the lovely colors that we twisted it into? It is orange and green and cream. So we're just going to cut off the end. And now I'm going to just make little slices down like this. And then we'll put them on our sheet and we'll bake them up. And they'll be ready in no time. And they'll be a perfect dessert for tonight. You know, got to go out with a bang. You know, this past week we made Guinness cupcakes with Bailey's Irish cream frosting. Those were delicious. And then yesterday we made an Irish apple cake with Bailey's cream sauce. And it was so good. It was like, I always say, it's not like a cake. It's like a mix between an apple pie and like a bread pudding almost. But it was so lovely and so different. But it was absolutely delicious. But I know my kids will be so happy to have these cookies. These are, again, their absolutely favorite cookie. And I like to make big batches of them, but I always dye them in like the holiday colors. So we did red and green for Christmas. For Halloween, I do green, orange, and purple. And Easter's coming up, so we'll probably do some nice pastel colors. And Valentine's, I did red and white. So it's just always fun to, you know, have them. And I will say this will be eaten in no time because they're not very big cookies. They're fairly small, but they are delicious. And my kids will eat the dough like crazy. So we just are gonna line them out. And you see how they have this just lovely green and orange swirl. Perfect. But, you know, it's kind of like, you know, how you can buy those cut cookies at the grocery store? Well, this is like the homemade version of them, and they taste so much better. You know, they give you, they're kind of, you know, not as sweet as a sugar cookie, but, you know, not as dense as a butter cookie, but just perfect. Okay. Oh, one more. And I'm just going to pop them in the oven right here that I have set at 350 degrees. And Miss Bruni, you can't have trash. Always getting into stuff. Okay, let's flip our cabbage here. Beautiful. We're getting a nice kind of a brown on it. I'm going to turn it up a little bit now. You can see it's starting to wilt. Perfect. And delicious. We'll put a little garlic salt on it. And then let's make our fruit bowl for tonight. I think our pot pies will be done in like 5 minutes. So we are down to the last few minutes and we are almost done. Let's see, we put those in, I'm going to see on here. So in like 6-7 minutes, so about a minute after we take the pot pies out, our cookies will be done. Okay, we're going to do grapes and oranges because they're the color of St. Patrick's Day. Let me give this a nice little wash.
Yeah, but question, how many people do you cook for every night?
It varies, but between like 7 and 9 most days. But occasionally we'll cook for a lot more, like, you know, if my brother and them come or whatnot. But I cook every night for my immediate family, which is my husband and I and our 5 kids. And then I also cook for my parents. So they're pretty much always eating our food. So yes, it's a big army, but we love it.
2 things. What time is it here? And you had a bunch of people push the likes, and you had 25,000 likes.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Wow, that's awesome to hear. It is about 8:45 here. We are night owls. We eat late. It's always just kind of how we've been. Sometimes we'll eat earlier. If we ever eat before 7 o'clock, my children think that it is lunch. And then they'll come around like this time and they'll be like, oh, what's for dinner? And I'm like, we had dinner at like 6. And they're like, what? I thought that was lunch. With our kids' sports, it's just really hard to get dinner out anytime sooner. And I'm a big advocate for making home-cooked meals and eating at the table tonight, like together every night. And so I can't cook until I get home from sports. And tonight I didn't get home until like a little after 7. So, you know, and it was funny. It was exactly how I grew up. We ate really late growing up too. And I know it's like, there's like some families who eat at 6. That is maybe Sunday dinner. Sunday dinner is when we sometimes eat at 6. But most of the time we eat between 7:45 and like 9 o'clock.
What sports do the kids do?
My son does basketball and baseball. And then my daughters, they both do soccer, and they're like on year-round teams. I'm really proud of them. They made the Olympic development program for their age groups. So they picked the best soccer players in Tennessee to form a team. So I was very excited when they both got offers for that. And then my little ones, of course, my little one does gymnastics, but my 18-month-old, he just goes along for the ride. There we go. But it keeps us busy because nobody's schedules a lineup. Nobody, you know, so it's every single night. And when your kids get older, they love to put your practices really late. So, you know, there's like nothing you can do about it when it gets that late. But You know, we go with it, go with the flow, we pivot, and we just have dinner here. And most of the time it's dinner, and then we go to, you know, my like younger ones go to bed right afterwards. But we try to get all of their homework and everything done beforehand, and then they get their little chill. We actually, it's funny, we just kind of instituted a new rule that, because I was like, we're getting too much screen time and too much this, that they now have to spend, they have 30 minutes doing a sport or an activity, and then they have to be outside for an hour playing, because, you know, there's nothing better than a good dose of nature. And of course, if they have a sport that day, it doesn't apply to them. It's just on their off days. We want them to be more outside, soaking up the sunshine, and less in front of a TV or a screen. And it's hard nowadays with teens and preteens and their whole little worlds, but that's what we're trying to do. I don't know how successful we'll be, but hopefully we soon. I think we're just about 1 minute. Okay, let's get our thing braised up here. We're going to add our seasonings now that we see if we're getting our cabbage is getting a lovely browning on it. Or I don't know why I keep saying braised. Our saute. Braising would use a liquid. Saute is just heating it up in the frying pan with butter at a high heat. Okay, we're going to put a little bit of garlic salt over it. You don't need too much, because I will say the salt really clings to the cabbage well. When I mix it, this is just going to be awesome. If you've never tried, you know, sauteed cabbage before, don't knock it till you try it. It is actually like so delicious. Cabbage doesn't have really strong flavor, but I feel like if you like broccoli, I think you'd like this as well, or even Brussels sprouts. I think Brussels sprouts have more of that like bitter flavor than cabbage does. Cabbage really just mimics the spices that you're cooking it on. Okay, let's head over to our oven, because our first pot pie that we put in is done, I'm pretty sure. Yep. Perfect. Okay. Beautiful. Got a nice golden crust on this guy. I'm going to pull it out just a little so I can bring him here. And then I'm going to carry him back. And we're going to let the other guy cook a little bit longer, because you want to have a nice rich golden crust on it, just like this. You don't want a light crust, because you want it to be cooked all the way through and nice and toasty. So let me put this on my trivet. Perfect. So here is our beautiful, what is it? Pub pot pie. Isn't it gorgeous? And
you got a question, where did you get the oven mitt?
I bought them on Amazon. I love I love quirky things. You know, there's so much about having a like picture perfect kitchen or picture perfect things, but what makes it you are like the little fun things. So I love the little quirkiness I have. You know, I've got these in lobsters, and oh yeah, they have like a little cat on it, like a rebel cat. They're hilarious. I have lobster ones and I have bear paw ones, but I just absolutely love them. They're just fun and they're functional. And you know what? I put them in a drawer. People don't have to see them, so I can give you a pretty kitchen. But
how many dogs? What's their breed and their name?
So I have 2 dogs, and they are King Charles Cavalier Spaniels. And the black one that is always by me, I rescued her like 2 years ago, and I'm like her savior, and she loves me and never leaves me alone. But her name is Bruni, which is short for Brunhilde. Brunhilde Hildegard of the Southern Valkyrie is her full name. My husband named her, and she goes by Bruni. It was when we rescued her, her name was Marino's Precious Phoebe, and that wasn't jiving with me. So we renamed her, and she's a Bruni. She's like an old lady, and she's definitely grumpy like an old lady at times. And then our other one, who is like, let's see if I can call him Loki. Loki. Oh, I think he's coming. I hear him. Oh, This is our other one. He is like really fat and he steals food, but his name is Loki. Okay, I'll give you guys some pets. Oh, so this is my fat Loki. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I get you? You're too heavy for me. And he's my baby. Let me wash my hands. But I got him like a 1 month after giving birth to my 4th child. I don't recommend doing a newborn and a baby at the same time. Don't recommend it all. Okay, let's cut into our pie, serve it up. Our cookies will be done in just a second. So by the time we cut them up, we can take it out. Okay. Now this is always the tricky part, is cutting into your pie. And you want to have, where's my good? There it is. This is like a shovel spoon. And it works best for our pot pie. So I'm going to see, oh, do you hear that? Do you see that nice crunch on it? Perfect. I'm going to try to make this look as beautiful as I can. But again, it's not about the beauty. It's about the taste.
We got a question. Do you have your cookie recipe posted anywhere?
I do have it posted, and there's a video of how to make them as well, posted on the link in our page. There we go. Let me grab a little bit of that. I will say, it's hard to get it out beautiful, but it tastes fantastic. And we'll have our cabbage on the side. And this, put it here. And of course, we're going to pair it with our orange and green. Let's see. Don't touch my fruit. So we're going to have our Irish pub pie and our braised cabbage and bacon. And of course, we'll be serving it with our Guinness sourdough and our regular sourdough. I'm thinking my kids are going to like this. And let's not forget the cookies. Pop these in and pull them out. They look fantastic. You see how they have puffed up? They actually will puff up and then sink down, and they 5 minutes after you bake them, they are perfect to eat. They're warm and delicious. And then the next day, they're like crispy, but they're excellent. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live cooking shows every single day, showing you what we're cooking for our family, the different recipes I make, try to teach you so you guys can, get in the kitchen and make it as well. Thanks again for joining us, and don't forget to like and subscribe.